Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausam Pereira. A woman was shot dead and dozens injured in the Venezuelan capital Caracas on Wednesday, in clashes between opposition supporters and pro-government forces. Tear gas and water cannons were fired by the military amid rival demonstrations. Opposition leader Juan Guaido called for a series of strikes to force President Nicolas Maduro to relinquish power. He urged public employees to act on Thursday, saying the stoppages would lead to a general strike. Guaido in January declared himself Venezuela's interim leader, and he has been recognized by more than 50 countries, including the US, UK, and most Latin American nations. But Maduro, who is backed by Russia, China, and the leaders of Venezuela's military, has refused to cede power. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the US military action is possible in Venezuela to bolster Guaido's bid to oust President Maduro. The president has been crystal clear and incredibly consistent. Military action is possible if that's what's required. That's what the United States will do, Pompeo told a news channel in the United States. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the political crisis in Venezuela. Joining me on the program today are Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU, Meera Shankar, former ambassador, and A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director of the Business Standard. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand and try and put things into perspective as far as the fluid situation in Venezuela is concerned. What's happening on the ground?
Well, the situation is extremely fluid politically, and this flows from the great difficulties that Venezuela has faced since Maduro came to power on account of the fall in oil prices, which led to an increase in the prices of imported goods, a fall in the GDP of Venezuela, and hyperinflation, which is even difficult to gauge. I mean, some say it's 60,000%. So it doubles every few days, the prices of goods. And this has led to a great deal of public disaffection. Of course, on the other side, President Maduro says that this is an effort by Venezuela's elite, which has been unhappy with the pro-people policies of the government, to unseat it. The fact is that the economy is in a shambles today, and people face shortages of food, medicines, and other essential commodities. Poverty has grown, and all this is leading to political cleavages and demonstrations. The recent election in which President Maduro was elected was boycotted by sections of the opposition. And in the wake of that, Juan Guaido, who was declared himself the interim president. But as you said, the army continues to back him. And therefore, at the moment, the situation is unclear. On Wednesday, Mr. Guaido gave a call to members of the public services to strike and to come out in his support. And his supporters and the supporters of President Maduro and the army have clashed. And that is where these injuries and the one casualty have been reported.
Right.
The situation is internationally also not without tension, because President Maduro is backed by Russia, China, Cuba, Bolivia, and even Mexico, which has remained kind of neutral, because there's a whole history of US interventionism in Latin America, which is very emotive, because it's often been geared towards protecting some US corporate interest or the other. So there's a whole history. But at the moment, the majority of Latin American countries have backed Juan Guaido.
Absolutely. All right. You know, there's a history to this, isn't there, Professor? You know, when you look at Iraq, the Americans went in, there was this whole section in the society which said that the Americans went in because of the Iraqi oil. When you look at Venezuela, you know, it seems like history is repeating itself and the same accusation is made this time around as well. What is it really?
I think as Ambassador Meera Shankar beautifully brought out the current scenario and did refer to history. In some ways, I would say this whole episode is not out of character with Venezuelan history, say even of last 100 years. Experiments of democracy have come and gone, democratic leaders have become authoritarian, these things have happened off and on. The last stable phase was, of course, of Hugo Chavez. And then, of course, from the very beginning, Maduro's tenure has been full of ups and downs, of controversies and all kinds of referendums, experiments. And I think this is kind of reaching a kind of a nadir of that, tenure from, about a decade now. US intervention is out of character, because if you remember, Donald Trump during election campaign and later had been very critical of his predecessors of their interventions abroad. So him now trying, if not directly through his aides particularly, certain kind of intervention through sanctions, threatening, influencing others who are supporting Maduro. Maduro has even accused White House of staging a kind of a military coup. That part is perhaps out of character in that sense of history of Latin America and the United States. My sense is that there is quite a strong wave now. If you understand that about 3 million people have simply left Venezuela in 5 years, and now we are talking of again millions of people on streets protesting. About 50 countries, not just United States is on the lead, but about 50 countries, I'm told, have recognized the leader of opposition who believes that he is the rightful candidate to take over as president. I think there is a certain amount of wave in favor of change at this stage. How painful that would be, how prolonged that would be, I think that is something that we can continue discussing, but it seems that the reason why military leaders again continue to be supporting Maduro is that several military leaders, and not just of this regime, have had certain hand in the pie of various illicit trades and other things, and they would be very worried about what change would mean to them in the sense of corruption investigations coming out, human rights investigations coming out, they could be jailed, etc., etc. So out of fear, not so much out of loyalty, that they are standing with Maduro presidency at this stage. So I think it's going to be, my understanding is a pretty painful change, but I think change is certain and we are moving in that direction.
Talking about change, Mr. Bhattacharya, is change also going to bring out a change as far as Venezuela's economy is concerned? Because, the crux of the problem and why we are here today is because of the fact that Venezuela's economy has, imploded.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you there at all. I mean, the economics of Venezuela's political crisis is quite interesting to track. Let us not make any mistake that Venezuela is actually quite a classic example of a petrostate. And what is a petrostate? Broadly, there are 4 characters of a petrostate. One, you have the government income is almost completely reliant on export income. Now, in the case of Venezuela, 98% of its export earnings comes from oil. Its GDP is dependent to the tune of 50% is on oil. And that GDP, as the ambassador rightly pointed out, has been shrinking in double digits for the last 3 years for a variety of reasons. One, international oil prices have also been falling. So that's the first part of it being a petrostate. The second part of it being a petrostate is that the economic and political powers in a petrostate are largely concentrated in an elite minority. And we have seen over the years in Venezuela that whether it is Hugo Chavez or whether it is Hugo Chavez's predecessor or it is now Maduro or the claimant now, essentially an elite minority is taking charge of the economic and political leadership there. Third, the political institutions are very weak and they are almost unaccountable. And the fourth, there is widespread corruption. So if you look at Venezuela, in all the institutions, there's a classic case of a failed petrostate. Like there are many other petrostates in the world, Venezuela is clearly one of them. Now what happens is that along with the petrostate phenomenon, it is also suffering from what is called a Dutch disease. Now the moment the Dutch disease is essentially when foreign capital starts coming in and becomes your main source of income. Now when the main source of income is foreign capital because of the oil, and Venezuela, as we know, has got the world's largest oil reserves. So when foreign capital comes in, what happens is the currency, local currency appreciates. When the local currency appreciates, the trade is largely on imports. Imports rise. The traditional activities of agriculture and manufacturing get replaced by import. So it becomes a trading economy where you are importing because it's easy to import. Now this affects jobs, unemployment rises. Because of the oil price fluctuations, your debts start piling up. So you can see the vicious cycle that Venezuela has got itself into. And to my mind, if this petrostate features and the Dutch disease that it is contracted cannot be solved unless you have basic fundamental reforms in the Venezuelan economy and indeed its politics. So it's unfortunate, and I would not rule out the suggestion that you mentioned initially that, is the US interest in Venezuela is largely driven also by the fact that Venezuela is tomorrow's Iraq, because it's got the large world oil reserves, and what will be a better option than the US gaining some sort of a military control or some sphere of influence over Venezuela.
Right.
So I think the economy has probably in many ways dictated the politics of Venezuela in today's situation.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the United States and the statements made by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Now he said that the US military action can't be ruled out. Now how serious do you think this is, Ambassador?
Well, if the US can achieve its objectives without direct military intervention, I think that would be the preferred choice. There was a history of US interventionism in Latin America, whether in Chile or in Brazil or other countries, concerted efforts to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba and so on. But in recent years, the US has learned a little strategic patience in Latin America, even as many Latin American countries turned left of center with nationalist governments in Bolivia, Ecuador, and many other places. The US, while trying to change things, lived with it rather than having recourse to a military coup or whatever they used to, which were their preferred tactics in the past. So we have to see, how easily the Trump administration would actually resort to military intervention, because on the one hand, they are pulling back from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iraq. On the other hand, if they feel that they don't want, the outcome is not clear, then I think that there would be reluctance to intervene. If they feel the situation is ripe, needs a little push, then they haven't ruled it out. But, in politically clouded situations, military intervention can be a very blunt tool, but perhaps not fine enough to shape eventual outcomes.
Right, right. Taking off from where the ambassador left, professors, let's not forget there are other players in the mix as well. There are some superpowers. There's Russia, there's China and others just, waiting to get into the picture there and try and sort this mess out. So Mike Pompeo has referred to that as well. He said that Maduro wanted to leave Venezuela, but it was the Russians who forced him to stay. So is this really the new playground of the tussle between the United States and Russia?
I think if you read the statements from Mike Pompeo and then responses by Sergei Lavrov, it looks like it is becoming a kind of a battlefield for Russia and United States in some sense. But it's also important to see that it's not just statements in terms of just words. Iran, China, Russia have actually sent delegations to Venezuela during this crisis to showcase and demonstrate that they stand by Maduro, and I think certain amount of discussion on humanitarian assistance. The other interesting thing is that President Trump, who's been himself reluctant, his team is full throttle up in especially social media campaign against Venezuela. There have been also a bit of disjunctions. I think, if I remember, there was a tweet by John Bolton talking about the protesting, the Operation Freedom itself having potentially dictatorial impulses. So A, there is no clear one voice. B, there is no clear strong message of military intervention being a strong possibility. And third, I think is most interesting that this, in that case, would be the decisive issue in presidential elections next year. So I think United States will be extremely cautious, as Ambassador Meera Shankar just mentioned. Whereas on the other hand, China, Russia, in fact, Xi Jinping and Putin had a meeting in Beijing this weekend on this when they were attending the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation, and probably came out with a statement which is very detailed and upfront, saying that any such effort of intervention to influence third party, especially using force and illegal means, implying sanctions, is completely unacceptable, and this is a breach of international law. So it's a fairly detailed statement that has come out of these two very powerful leaders who are safe in their tenure in comparison to President Donald Trump. So I do see, yes, Maduro has his military with him, has these countries that are backing him up. But if you look at the mood on the street there, I think, and if you look at particularly the situation of economy there, I think that is what is a bigger challenge. So I would see internal situation being far more decisive for Maduro's survival or otherwise than these external players who are basically kind of buying influence compared to each other and wouldn't blink an eye of what happens on the ground and which leader finally comes to take over power following end of this current crisis. So I still believe that Trump has enormous limitations in actually using military option. He has been against it in terms of his campaign and later, but also I think in terms of actual pragmatic options. And let me just add 10 seconds of last comment on this. If you look at last 2+ years of Donald Trump, this always hyperactive, aggressive, barbos that you notice, especially in tweets and other things. But in terms of his actual actions, you will notice one after another, he's been maneuvering, compromising, accommodating, lowering down his sort of demands on other countries. So, this will again apply to Venezuela. That,
so it's more of posturing is what you're suggesting.
Posturing may be different than actual policies on the ground.
Okay. Mr. Bhattacharya, the professor and the ambassador have spoken about, the limitations really as far as the United States is concerned when they think about a military option. But another aspect that to think about also is probably the slowdown in the United States economy itself. And if they go in for a military action, it could impact the economy of the United States as well.
Well, for the moment, the U.S. is in a sweet spot. The first quarter numbers have just come and shown that instead of actually economy slowing down, it is actually has recorded one of its better growth numbers this quarter. So, I really don't know whether the U.S. economy will actually slow down as it is being feared in many circles. I mean, given the fact that the tax cuts and some other incentives that the Trump government had introduced are now beginning to kick in. And in many ways, the US-China strategy has actually benefited large number of companies which are not located in China. So therefore, there is a kind of a new animal spirit that is at work among the US industry, and which probably has resulted in the slowdown in US. The feared slowdown has been sort of delayed by a few quarters at least. So therefore, I don't see that the US will be restrained because of its internal problems. I think what it will be constrained, as my two other guests said, is that whether it will be possible in today's, the global theater, is it possible for a country to enter Venezuela and be an active player? So that, I think, is a concern. But my sense is that the domestic economic issues of Venezuela, since the US sanctions on Venezuela, its export earnings have also come down substantially. Now, unless you actually tackle the Venezuelan domestic economy problem, the inflation is 80,000% now. Debt is reached a level which is unsustainable. GDP is shrinking. You have your oil production, which is also, actually the growth is decelerating in the last few quarters. It produces around 2.3 million barrels per day of oil, out of which around 1.5 million barrels per day used to be exported. Now that export share has come down dramatically.
Right.
So therefore, the Venezuela is in an economically very tight spot. So therefore, my sense, purely from an economic point of view, the US is probably in a better, stronger position to dictate terms to Venezuela in the hope that it will have a larger say in the Venezuelan oil economy and not allow its rivals like Russia or China to get a strategic entry at this point in time.
Sure. So closing comments from all my guests. Now starting first with you, Ambassador. What's the way out? How do you see things panning out in the days to come?
It's very difficult to predict. If the crisis comes to a head leading to change, then there's one trajectory that you can look at, and Juan Guaido has also offered to the army that they will be given amnesty so that they won't be prosecuted, in the hope that this encourages them to defect. But at the moment, that really is not looking that it's yielding results. But given that poverty has gone up, people are really actually now hungry. They're not able to eat 3 square meals a day. I think this is going to, the pressure is going to build up to the point where something has got to give.
Right. Just to take off from there, Professor, we should spare a thought for the people of Venezuela and the massive humanitarian crisis there.
I think it's not in the making.
And who's bothered about that at the end of the day?
It's not a crisis in the making, as the Ambassador said. It's already a crisis there facing us as an international community. So the first sense is that the shorter this period is, the better it is. But how is that going to be made shorter period rather than prolonged process, which is painful change? Is where foreign actors, major players would have to step in and play a certain amount of role. I also agree that it's a backyard of United States, so they would be far more emotively kind of responding to the situation there rather than very, cost-benefit calculus being the only guide. Comparatively, China, Russia would be, able to accommodate much more the points that United States want to push for. India continues to play the equidistance in this case. A certain amount of distance between Venezuela and here, I think, helps us in that sense. Also, Venezuela, perhaps, as Bhattacharya ji just mentioned, petro state. So its earnings from India as a buyer of oil was perhaps far more important than India's dependence. And I understand we have reached almost zero purchase level from Venezuela. So international players, I think, international players can help it to make it a kind of a less painful and less prolonged affair.
Right. Mr. Bhattacharya, is all of this going to have an impact on the oil market?
I think certainly. Because Venezuela is the 11th largest producer of oil in the world, even now. It's one of the main exporters. It's a member of OPEC. So therefore, if Venezuela as oil production is halted or slows down as a result of these crises, then surely the oil market will hot up. So therefore, the oil prices may go up, which is bad news for India. And India obviously has to look for alternative sources of supply of its crude oil. So for the oil market is going to be a problem. But for the international community, as the professor rightly pointed out, cannot remain a bystander anymore, in my view. Because Venezuela is too large an oil economy for the future at least, for any bodies like the United Nations or anybody to just let things happen the way they are happening. So the first thing to my mind, an international community must really focus on how to rebuild institutions in that country. That Venezuela is very poor in terms of institutions. Its judiciary is completely broke. Its parliamentary institutions are suffering. That's number one. Number two is it's true that you must give food to the people. Make sure that people don't go hungry. But equally important from an economic point of view is to rebuild the infrastructure. The infrastructure in Venezuela is shattered after years of neglect.
Right.
And the third thing is, because Venezuela is a strong oil economy, it's probably time for the country and the global community to create some kind of a sovereign wealth funds for Venezuela, which can use the oil income that they get for better use instead of it becoming a preserve of that elite minority in Venezuela. So
right.
I think certain steps have to be taken, and Venezuela cannot go down the drain by the world.
All right. Certainly, several steps need to be taken as far as Venezuela is concerned, and a lot needs to be done. How things pan out in the near future, of course, remains to be seen. But I'd like to thank all my guests now for joining me on the program and sharing your views and putting things into perspective for us. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.